Good evening, everyone. This is Barry Chamish. I've got a really good show, and I made sure of it because I read Joel Skousen's report this week. By the way, he's the editor of the World Affairs Brief, and he'll tell you how to get to that later. But it was a very good report. Actually, he shined in this one. Joel, are you there?
I am, Barry. It's good to be with you.
The same here. By the way, I get your reports every time. We have a mutual friend, that's Herman Feichworth, who I took a fantastic drive across America with a number of years back, and we've remained friends ever since. He sends it to me every time, so I'm following you every time. Look, I believe this as well. Um, let's just dive into it. You began with Seymour Hersh's report that said Pakistan was informed and supported the attack on bin Laden, but you took it a lot farther than that. All right. What you said is what Hersh missed. Hersh thought that bin Laden was killed. And what you're claiming, and this is a quote from you, the entire raid was a propaganda stunt, taking down one of the CIA's Osama lookalikes, and not the real Osama bin Laden, who had been dead for years. All right. Take that one sentence and explain what you mean.
Well, basically, Hersh is arguing with the official version over details. And that detail is whether or not Pakistan was involved, knowledgeable of, and supportive of the raid. Now, when you know how big the country of Pakistan is, and to think that Pakistan, with its radar at pointing at the borders because of India and its relationship, adversarial relationship with India, it's impossible to think that several helicopters, even though one was a stealth helicopter, could invade their airspace without their permission and without being knowledgeable. But this really misses the point. The point that Hersh and the official version completely glosses over is whether or not Osama bin Laden was dead. And there are credible evidences, including Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto of Pakistan and Omar Saeed Sheikh killed bin Laden in 2002. And then Afghan President Hamid Karzai, Pervez Musharraf of Pakistan, and the FBI's own counter-terrorism chief, Dale Watson, have all gone on record in the past saying that he was dead a long time ago.
Well, the Americans should relate to Dale Watson. You would think that they'd respect, the counterterrorism chief of the FBI. You don't happen to have his exact words in front of you.
No, I don't. But he's gone silent on the issue. It means that he's been put under pressure. He's not responding to any inquiries about his past statement. Basically, they get to a person, can't get to Benazir Bhutto. She's dead now. Musharraf is gone. But these people have made statements. It's in the public record. You can Google their statements about them. And Benazir Bhutto even named the person who killed bin Laden, Omar Saeed Sheikh, in 2002. Now, there is some discrepancy. The others say that he died of kidney disease, which I think is more believable, frankly, because there is a personal witness to his dialysis treatment in 2001, 10 years supposedly before he died in this publicity stunt. But people just don't live that long on dialysis. Generally, life expectancy is around 5 to 7 years. And there was no dialysis equipment claimed to be present. It doesn't show up in the video when they're confronting this Osama bin Laden. The neighbors around his compound said it was not guarded, and Hersh says that his source told him that they had ISI guards around the place, but there would be no reason for guards around the place anyway if this was not bin Laden, and the neighbor said it wasn't Osama bin Laden. and that it was not guarded, and then they saw the family that was living there coming and going numerous times.
Well, between you and me, I've been in this business too long not to recognize something I've seen before. And this raid, let's just say, it's not the first time this strategy has been used. I'd say Kennedy Jr., they did the same thing. They knocked his plane out of the air, and then they cremated him on a ship and dumped him overboard. It was the same operation, really. And when I watched this from my little apartment, I said, "This is phony." And essentially, you're verifying everything I suspected.
Well, the Obama administration has been very, very concerned because, first of all, they're just embarrassed that anybody of the stature of Seymour Hersh would challenge the official version. It makes them look bad. And so they come out with broad-based statement like everything he says is a lie. And there are too many lies for us to comment on. Well, no, that does a disservice to the public. I mean, give us one example at least of a lie instead of trying to use this broad brush. And then there's, of course, the attack on conspiracy by saying if you believe Psy, you would have to believe there's a massive conspiracy between President Obama, Robert Gates, Leon Panetta, Mike Morrell.
That's not so many people.
It's not so many people, exactly right. And in fact, we're dealing with a conspiracy that's probably a little bit bigger than that. They're naming public figures, but who puts these kinds together are globalists behind the scene who actually do control the administration, and they protect Obama. They protected him about his illegal alien status. They protected him about his false Social Security card. He's got all kinds of skeletons in his closet, and these people who provide that kind of protection, even unto every appeals court that has seen the case on his birth certificate has been leaned on. Every member of the Supreme Court has been leaned on to make sure they don't take the case. I mean, these are proofs of a conspiracy. We may not know who's calling the shots, but we can watch their actions. When judges, for example, say, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and then he turns around and said, case dismissed, somebody got to him, the old telephone call in the night, telling him how he's going to act. But the point
let's get to the nuts and bolts of what would happen. Well, what you're saying is not essentially. What you're actually saying is that when this raid took place, bin Laden was already long dead, and the SEAL soldiers killed a lookalike. That, in short, that's your contention.
That's right. I'm not contending that SEALs didn't actually do a raid. I'm not contending that the raid did not occur. I'm not contending that intelligence people, including the one who may have been talking to Seymour Hersh, didn't plan or have knowledge of the details. But they're all lacking the essential detail. They were told by their higher-ups, you're going after Osama bin Laden, and none of them ever challenged that fact. They ended up killing somebody who looked very much like bin Laden. Experts who have analyzed the various videos that the CIA released, and they always release.
They're all from behind. You see,
yeah, but they
yes.
But what I'm saying is that bin Laden in some of the videos looks younger. He changes weight. He changes age. Facial features don't match known photos of bin Laden. He even wore a watch in one of the videos, which is a Muslim fundamentalist no-no. And so, it has long been suspected that the CIA had a lookalike, or one or two, and was producing videos claiming where Osama bin Laden claims credit for 9/11 that are faked, really, because bin Laden worked for the CIA for many years, didn't have anything to do with 9/11, which was a government black operation.
Yes, that's our next topic coming up. Again, it's amongst mine. Look, I'm getting old. I'm not in the prime of my research years. Now, when I look at 9/11, it was a little past my prime, which was Rabin. All right. That's when I watched my country go to hell. The issue, once again, is 9/11, and what you're contending is something I'm suspecting. Um, that operation stunk. At 5:20 in the afternoon, they had a little problem. They had a building full of explosives and an airplane that fell in Pennsylvania instead of crashing into the building, providing a pretext. So they knocked it down. The explosives were in the building. And
yeah, and how could the terrorists have done that? It's just impossible. Would have taken
of course it is.
weeks, or if not months, of pre-placing of explosives in a building to bring it down in a controlled demolition, which is exactly.
And yet Silverstein, supposedly with the collaboration of the New York Fire Department, gave the order to pull the building. How do you just pull a building and straight down at that?
Yeah, how do you suddenly wire for explosives and give it a demolition within 15 minutes notice? No, sir. Explosives were there beforehand, which means this could only have been a government operation. It was far too complex for terrorists.
The pretext, a plane crashing into the building didn't work out because it crashed in Pennsylvania for reasons we don't fully understand. We've been given a myth. But
yes, we have. There isn't enough wreckage in that crash site to explain a full airliner crashing into the ground. Just isn't there.
Well, as I say, for conspiratorial, when a building falls down straight, by the way, straight.
When it's only burning on one corner, impossible.
Well, it's so darn suspicious, and it's so darn obvious. But who am I to comment on why people are blind? I don't know how they missed that, but what the heck, they did. Now let's go with this CIA operation for 9/11. Then we'll return to this, by the way. This topic very much interests me, but we'll come back to it. What was 9/11? Now, you can give your theory on this one, but what was the point of it? If it was a government operation, as you are contending, what was the point of that operation?
Well, there are...
To send Americans to the Middle East, to send them to war.
There is a hierarchy. There is a hierarchy of reasons, and at its largest, most global affecting region, I believe the globalists ultimately are setting the stage for World War III, in which the U.S. is to be built up as the bully of the world. And so this didn't initiate it. They really started it in the Balkans operation, where they started bombing Serbian civilian targets and other things to create hatred against America among the Slavs and the Slavic people, which worked very, very good. This now then had as its largest global purpose to turn the Muslim world against America and view it as the enemy of all Islam. Muslims, heretofore in history, and the Slavs...
By knocking down American buildings, they're going to turn...
No. By allowing... Let me finish. By giving them excuse to go to attack the Muslim world. And that's what they did.
They certainly went into high gear with this Colin Powell just lying, making up stats, stuff I knew how to delete from my computer, and presenting them to the UN why we're going to attack. I wonder if he doesn't have nightmares over his deceit, but he sent American boys to die in Iraq.
Yes, and he realized that he was lying too, and tried to pull out, was leaned on, and forced to go through with this presentation with the UN. But he's a yes man from way back. He covered up for the My Lai massacre, and it's one of the commanding
officers.
That was
Hirsch's.
Yes,
Hirsch
it was, and Colin Powell was involved in that. Colin Powell was involved in the initial cover-up. So he's been carrying water for the establishment for many years. You don't get, just because you're a minority, to the position he got unless you're also a very useful idiot for the establishment, and especially who are run by what I consider globalists. Now, there were other purposes as well of 9/11. One of those was to actually have an excuse to go into Afghanistan and Iraq and to attack those two countries. In fact, Secretary O'Neill of the Treasury testified that in meetings he heard them months before 9/11 saying, we've got to find, not months before, but right after there, said, now we've got an excuse to go into Iraq and Afghanistan. Even though there was no evidence discussed in the meeting of any involvement by those two countries in 9/11, and there wasn't. If there was any involvement at all, it was through Saudi Arabia, who was in fact acting as the bag man for Osama bin Laden and the various al-Qaeda operatives that were run out of Saudi intelligence, financed by Saudi intelligence through the Osama bin Laden family. I mean, al-Qaeda was also a U.S.
We'll get to that shortly.
At the top level, not necessarily all the fighters under them, but at the top level. They were controlled through Saudi Arabia and Osama bin Laden.
Now, that's your next topic, but that's complicated.
It is. But let me get through the third before we move on. The third was to have an excuse to start to clamp down on American liberties and to make it a permanent clampdown through a never-ending war on terror that would be, ginned up at any incident. And they had done that, for example, by creating the Muslim threat in America. They staged, for example, a training camp in America and showed videos of Muslims fighting automatic weapons. That was 2.5 years ago. There's never been any attack. Why not, if you're training with automatic weapons? They leaked the story, which I think was false, of the ISIS training camp across the border from Mexico, and nothing's happened since then. Now, they did claim that the put-on Draw Mohammed contest in Garland, Texas, was an ISIS operation, but it has all the smackings of a government black operation. They set these two guys up to do an attack. They were surrounded by police. They claimed on Twitter that as they're preparing for an attack, they get on Twitter and warn everybody that they're coming. I mean, this is just stupid. If you're going to do a terrorist attack, you're going to you're going to warn them. You're going to do this 30 minutes before when you're supposed to be in the final preparation for terror. I think they didn't know anything about the trap that was being set. I think their handlers, who got them the weapons, who gave them the plans, got on Twitter and fingered these guys to the authorities because it was surrounded. They were just dead meat almost as soon as they had opened up the car doors.
No, I'm not entirely aware of this incident. Is it important?
Well, it's important only in the fact that it's my contention that there never has been real terrorism against the United States, other than the fact that by bombing these people and occupying the country, you've created hatred against the United States. But you cannot otherwise explain why before or after 9/11 there has never been a terrorist crossed the United States, even though the U.S. has claimed it and done a normal terrorist attack like you see in Israel all the time. There's not been one. And the reason there hasn't been, the reason these stories about Muslim training camps and camps across the border are bogus, is that if the U.S. were even to send through the various surrogates terrorists across the United States people would demand that border be secured within a month. And the government doesn't want to do that because there's an illegal alien agenda flooding the country with future Democratic voters that would be inhibited and impacted by that kind of a public reaction. And that's why I don't think you're going to see it. They're going to continue to say there's this threat across the border, and they're going to keep manufacturing small incidents. I don't think we're going to see another false flag major incidents like 9/11 just because...
Oh, no, that was too complicated.
It was not only too complicated, they showed their hand too much. It created thousands, if not millions, of conspiracy believers because of all the mistakes that they made and their attempts to cover it up. They don't want to
Joel, I know the Israeli side of this. And it's what it's awful. All right. Um,
Yeah,
the
the
fact
Mossad
is,
was involved in this 9/11 in various
yes, he
different
was.
ways.
He was
They
at the
have been.
White House on the evening of 9/11. No, it's not for me to say now. Some other time I'll say the problem is people leading us are not us. And unless people differentiate between our leadership and our people, things get mighty murky.
Yes, that's right. And unfortunately, the leadership is hiding behind the historical mask of liberty, of constitutional. They still raise their oath to the Constitution, even though they disregard it constantly. They haven't read it. They don't believe in it. There's a conspiracy of power. They run drugs as well as fight drugs. They run terrorists as well as fight terrorists. We're running both sides of this issue. This is a massive conspiracy ultimately against liberty, not just one of personal corruption. And it's very much analogous to what you pointed out in the murder of Yitzhak Rabin. There's the same modus operandi. There's the same government
That
cover-up
would be
and government
JFK Jr.
government
That's where
control.
they got the body out of the ocean, and they
Yeah,
got
the
the
same
Navy
thing.
out, and they cremated him. And
Yeah, they claimed all this stuff about Osama bin Laden, but I think they couldn't dare show the body. They claimed even later on that the SEALs had recognition camera or facial recognition software on a camera, and that's baloney. They don't go carrying around that kind of equipment on a raid, and if they did, they should be showing the evidence. You can't do facial recognition software unless you have a legitimate photograph of the original.
there wasn't one photo from the front. All
right.
the pictures were from behind. You couldn't see him.
Yes. And as well, the people on the aircraft carrier, the Carl Vinson, said there was no body, there was no cremating, there was no dumping into the sea. It just didn't happen. This was just a concocted excuse. But the biggest excuse in the Osama bin Laden raid has to do with the whole success of the raid. According to the neighbors interviewed by Pakistani television, there was only one helicopter landed, and it was that stealth helicopter that crashed upon takeoff after the raid was completed. It said it crashed and burned, and everybody got burned up in it. There were no survivors.
Didn't it? I'm sorry, but I don't think it crashed. I think it crashed at the compound. It crashed on landing, I thought.
No, it did not crash on landing. According to the witnesses, it landed safely. There was only one helicopter, not two. There was no other rescue copter. And after the raid and the gunfire, they saw people get into the copter, and it tried to take off, hit power lines or something, and crashed and burned, and nobody survived. Now, this is interesting because there is backup evidence to support that, not just the eyewitnesses.
It was widely reported. 2 helicopters went in, 1 came back.
Right, but that's all government official stuff. I'm saying there's no corroboration from the witnesses that there were 2 helicopters, only 1.
All right, I'm confused.
No, you don't. There's no confusion necessary. If the government says something, we know now from the Osama bin Laden claims that you can't take anything.
Oh, Joel, I hate to do this. We're having a great conversation. And by the way, this is really up my alley. I've suspected all these things all the way. I've suspected them. And now this is a terrific interview. We'll be back in 3 minutes. We have commercials. This is Barry Chamish. Guest is Joel Skousen. When we come back, he'll plug himself. And I'll plug me as well. We'll be back in 3 minutes.
I pledge allegiance to the King of Kings, and to his kingdom come, on earth as it is in heaven. One holy nation, under Heavenly Father, grace, mercy, justice for all.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188.
Hi, everybody. This is Barry Chamish. I've got Joel Skousen, and we've got a topic that's up my alley. All right. Look, you get hold of all my books, all of them at lulu.com, www.lulu.com. You'll see a search box right in Chamish, Chamish. You'll get to 11 books. That's how long my career was, all right? I'm not saying it's completely over, but at my peak, I wrote 11 books about the Middle East from a different angle than you're used to getting. And my website, I think David Samrin is still there. It's barrychamish.com, www.barrychamish.com. And all right, Joel, tell people how to get a hold of you.
Well, the World Affairs Brief is my publication. It comes out every Friday by email to my subscription list. And you can get on that list by subscribing to the World Affairs Brief at the website worldaffairsbrief.com. And before you do, though, you can get a free sample issue by emailing me at editor@worldaffairsbrief.com. And if you do so this week, you get the sample that is about this bin Laden story and all the details that we're not able to cover in this interview. So I encourage people to do that.
One more time, give the address.
Worldaffairsbrief.com is the website, and to get a free sample issue, you email me at editor@worldaffairsbrief.com, and it also tells you how to do that on the front page of the website.
Well, if anyone missed that, we are archived for 1 week at www. Oh, it's not. What am I saying? Um, you know what? I forgot the address of where we're archived. Uh, I'm not the same. It'll come to me in 1 second. LibertyArchives.com. It came to me. LibertyArchives.com. All right. Now let's go. Let's start with the Carl Vincent. Bin Laden was the Navy somehow were recruited and set sail to just in time to dump his body forever lost into the ocean, and that's why we don't have a body. Let's do this Carl Vincent story.
Well, the helicopter, claimed to have buried the body at sea, and to have taken the body and the hostages out there to the Carl Vincent. And sailors on the Carl Vincent said it wasn't true. There wasn't any body. There wasn't any hostages. Just a military helicopter landing. But I suspect this was not the helicopter. Of course, we know it wasn't the helicopter that crashed. This was the second helicopter that witnesses in Abbottabad, Pakistan, said was circling around but never landed. In other words, it was the support helicopter, the alternate helicopter to come in and do any rescues if necessary. And when that first chopper crashed upon takeoff trying to leave and burned, and there were no survivors, they didn't land. There was no reason to land because of that accident. So they went to the Carl Vincent. There was no Osama bin Laden. There was no hostages, according to the sailors. So it was all fabricated.
All right. Now, again, people will read you and get deeper details, the deeper proofs. But in short, what you're saying is bin Laden was not thrown into the sea from the Carl Vincent.
That's right. Nobody left that compound alive, including the SEAL Team 6. Now remember, SEAL Team 6 is much larger than the actual raiding team, which was probably composed of half a dozen people. Now, this is the strange thing. If the witnesses, the neighbors to the actual compound, are correct that nobody exited this raid operation, the government had to come up with some story to explain how the government or how their boys died. They couldn't admit, since they
Couldn't
said
they say they died heroically killing bin Laden?
Well, maybe they could have, but then they would have had to explain that this was a failed operation in terms of the death of all the people thing. But the point is they didn't do that. What they did is, 4 months later in Afghanistan, they had a Chinook helicopter crash, and they claimed that SEAL Team 6 was members were on that helicopter.
Oh, come on! For 4 months, what they weren't writing their families. No one knew they were alive.
Yeah. Well, they obviously weren't writing
months?
the family. Yeah. I mean, look, when they are deployed in operations, they don't write families. So their families are used to not hearing from them from long periods of time. But the government had to come up with some excuse to explain to them why their children had died, and that's
well. How did they explain that the actual occupants of the helicopter? I mean, they disappeared. I mean, what you're doing here is you're playing a Ponzi scheme. All right, 6 die. You replace them with 6, but what happened to the first 6? How did they die?
The original SEAL Team 6 on the raid died at the raid, according to the testimony. All right. And so what they had to do, and this is what's interesting, is that they claimed that when this helicopter went down in August of 2011, the Osama bin Laden raid came off in May. In August, when this helicopter crashed, they suddenly claimed that there was no passenger manifest for the helicopter, but that SEAL Team 6 members were aborted. Now, you see what they're doing here? Look, as a military pilot, I can tell you that leaving a regular military base, no aircraft leaves without a passenger manifest, a record of who's on board that aircraft. So for them to say
it took off without
there was
a
no
record.
listen, for them to say there was no passenger manifest means they made it disappear so that they could claim that SEAL Team 6 was on it. They were already dead. Now, and there's another piece of evidence, and that is that SEAL Team 6...
What a complicated cover-up.
Wait a minute. Just a minute. SEAL Team 6 also has their own dedicated helicopters, and they aren't CH-47 Chinooks. They don't ever ride reserve helicopters. They ride their own helicopters. And so there's no reason for SEAL Team 6 to have been on this helicopter.
Why not just tell the truth? They died taking out bin Laden heroically. There are heroes. It's not so bad.
But they didn't do that. Remember the first story? Look, everything was falsified from the very beginning. Remember the picture of all these high-powered people sitting around this small little conference table watching a television set? This is not the Situation Room. This was a falsified, staged photograph session. I mean, that's not the Situation Room in the White House. People have been there. This is a massive room. There's no little cubicle where people squished in around for a photo op around a conference table watching a little television. It was falsified. It was staged.
Again, I'm not doubting that. I'm just asking myself, why go and wait 4 months? 4 months is a long time. People have families.
Yeah, but they had to wait They had to wait until there was a real helicopter crash. Then they could claim that SEAL Team 6 was on it. Otherwise, they would have to sabotage and kill, other members in a government operation, and I don't think they wanted to do that. So they just waited until there was a natural crash occurring in Afghanistan, and then claimed that these SEAL Team 6 members were on it. But it gets worse. Now you have two claimed members of SEAL Team 6 come out and write a book about their account of it.
Oh, and the Matt Bissonnette one.
Matt Bissonnette and Robert O'Neill's account, and they differ. They aren't that both of them claim to, kill Osama bin Laden. I don't think either one did. I think these were put up by the government to publish the book, to take the credit for it, because the real SEAL Team 6 members were killed. Now, one of the evidences that this is a government operation, an extension of this false flag or this staged propaganda stunt, is that these people published their account without getting Pentagon permission of it. Well, they published it through Dutton, and Dutton is a major publishing house who would have known the rules, wouldn't have dared publish this without getting Pentagon review approval. And
what happened to freedom of speech and daring and courage and all that kind of stuff?
Well, as you know, the government can interdict in free speech of its military members who swear an oath that they're not allowed to reveal any classified operations, and this was classified. The Pentagon accused him,
Or is you saying that Dutton was playing by their rules?
No. Dutton knew the rules as a major, but knew that they could be sanctioned. But I think they knew that this was a government operation and had prior secret permission to go ahead and do this. The Pentagon then accuses Bissonnette of violating his confidentiality, but they took no action against him. So when's the last time you heard of the IRS accusing you of violating something and then taking no action against you? I think this is just simply more government political theater. And then there's the claim about having instant DNA proof of bin Laden's identity. Now, this is too good to be true. To have a DNA match, you've got to have an original sample. Where did they get the original sample of bin Laden's DNA?
If you say he's in a hospital, couldn't you just take a Q-tip into his cheek and get DNA?
Yeah, you could, but then you'd have to admit that the French story was true about the CIA station chief visiting bin Laden in the American hospital. Was true, and the government has denied that, vehemently, and they need to deny it, because what's the CIA chief visiting Osama bin Laden if he's planning not? It's just not true.
There is so much, let's call it funny stuff for now, okay? but nothing is truthful. Nothing. You have to scrape through everything. You're scraping. You're scraping. By the way, yesterday I wrote an article on the Vatican's uh, recognition of Palestine and sanctifying two nuns as making them saints. Did you get it?
What's that, Barry?
My article I wrote yesterday, I sent it to you.
Yes, I haven't been able to read it. I've been traveling.
All right, when you get a chance, I think you'll find I'm back to my lively, youthful spirit for some reason, I guess survival. All right, now let's ask the big question, and I asked this as well. He was unarmed. Bin Laden was sitting in a chair, and apparently they shot him in cold blood. Is this the way your military operates? And you asked the same question. Why didn't they take him alive for questioning?
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense unless you wanted to silence him and make him go away. And, of course, if this was one of the CIA lookalikes, of course they want him to disappear eventually so they can never talk about falsifying these videos in the name of Osama bin Laden. This was a hit squad. This was not, going after a high-value target. If Osama bin Laden had really planned 9/11, they would, of course, like they claimed that Sheikh Khalid Mohammed was involved in 9/11, and, of course, he admitted to so many different things under duress that it was impossible for 20 men, to have accomplished all that he did supposedly as a terrorist.
Well, we were stuck with looking at what they released, the pictures they released. They showed the back of a guy's head in an armchair, and that's pretty well it. We didn't see him.
Let me just comment about those pictures. The pictures that were shown of the raid turned out to be of a different person in a different raid. These were shown to various members of Congress, including Senator Scott Brown. He came out and said, I've seen the pictures of Osama bin Laden is dead. I certify it. And then he retracted it the next day and said, the pictures we were shown in Congress were false. They were from a different time period. So the government even lied to its own senators on the Senate Intelligence Committee and showed them pictures that were not, in fact, of Osama bin Laden or the raid.
It's incredible, really. I'm not talking about deep, profound conspiracy. 9/11, a building falls down. Who blew it up? Where were the explosives? How'd they get in there? These are such simple, superficial questions, but the public is not asking.
Well, they may be simple questions, but the overall picture of the fact that, how could the terrorists have got inside access and loaded those buildings with explosives? And how could they have triggered from the outside of the building with their own people supposedly in planes? How could they have triggered these explosives to bring the building down? This is far too complex for any terrorist operation. Only something as complex as a highly funded government operation.
Two planes knocked down two buildings. All right, let's assume that for 1 second, that it worked. They hit the buildings and they collapsed. It doesn't explain when one building wasn't hit.
Building 7. No, it doesn't explain Building 7. It doesn't explain why there's no airline wreckage at the Flight 93 crash. It doesn't explain how half of a radome got inside the Pentagon in the Pentagon crash. If the airline crashed into a reinforced concrete wall, that radome would have been in 1,000 tiny pieces.
I think the Achilles heel here is Building 7. And don't forget,
it is the most obvious. It is the most obvious violation.
He collected $7 billion, 3.5 times 2 on Building 7.
Yeah,
it was a windfall.
And it also destroyed a lot of FCC records on investigations that were ongoing.
That's mine. That's not the real issue. The issue.
No, I know it isn't. Yeah.
The issue is there was no plane. Why did the building fall down? Why did the fire department decide to pull the building and could?
And then how did you get certified engineers to certify that, and falsify the reasons and falsify the engineering? I mean, this tells you a lot about conspiracy and the power to twist arms or to induce otherwise competent professionals to lie to the public. I mean, this shows a great deal of power in this conspiracy to control American opinion and take away liberty.
In the next hour, I'm going to talk about the really thin ice I'm treading on with Israel and, 9/11 for sure. There's a lot of very bothersome stuff to be investigated. All right, like the security at Newark and Boston airports were taken over by an Israeli firm that I'm not going. It's not my show. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be doing this. All right, let's go to your another one of your. You were hot this week. This week you were really good. All right. Now I'm going to be frank with you. I'm not in agreement with the conclusion, but I am in agreement with all kinds of your claims. More evidence of U.S. role with ISIS. Now, that's not small time. I've been saying that, ever since, about Debka closing down when they mentioned that the original ISIS was founded by American and Israeli army officers. You know this, right?
Yes, right. Yep.
Ever since then, come on, you don't take away a harmless site like Debka for 3 months unless they hit on something really, really good. Ever since then, I've known America and Israel funded the original ISIS, supposedly to bring down Bashar Assad. Supposedly. It's gone way out of control since then, but yes, there's plenty of evidence of a U.S. role with ISIS. Let's talk about what you present here. You present a front of the U.S. and Saudis on one hand backing moderate rebels, so-called, and Turkey and Qatar backing al-Qaeda. And what you're saying after quoting a journalist named Tony Cartalucci, not true. Saudi Arabia is funneling weapons, American weapons, Western weapons, to the very radical Al-Qaeda, and it's not the same war. All right, go and explain. That's my intro.
Well, there's a lot of evidence, some of it superficial, some of it pretty good, that the U.S. really did fund ISIS. First of all, there's the evidence that ISIS came out of nowhere in a 2-year period and amassed all of these arms, and the U.S. did nothing to interdict it. Even when Prime Minister al-Maliki of Iraq was telling the U.S. where these depots of massive arms accumulations and people were, and the U.S. refused to do it. I mean, look at the Iraqi parliament has presented evidence to its own parliament of videos where they see American helicopters landing in ISIS-controlled territory and resupplying them. Then there's the evidence just this week in Ramadi, where ISIS had this great big victory parade after, taking control of Ramadi, going down the highway with tanks and armored personnel and parades and troops. And where were the drones?
Is there anyone watching the parades?
What I'm just saying is, Iraqis were talking about, where are the drones? Where are the U.S. air power striking these people that they can go parading after a victory where the U.S. air power was not assisting in any way? You can't get tanks and armored personnel carriers into a battle without crossing the desert. And the U.S. has satellite surveillance. They didn't interdict them on the way to Ramadi, and they didn't interdict them in their victory parade after that, when they were totally vulnerable to attack. That can only be explained by the fact that ISIS is a U.S. intel and British intel operation, and that they're not intending really to stop ISIS, because ISIS, I'm contending, was created to take down Assad.
Well, that's what they said. All right, it was Syrian rebels who became ISIS, and they were funded and armed by the Americans and Israelis. Debka reported it. It was not popularly received, and they were taken off the airwaves for 3 months.
Yeah, that's right. And Debka, is vulnerable because they use almost exclusive. I mean, you got a 3-man team. They're not going to be able to check on any of these stories. They rely on Israeli and American intelligence leaks to them, and I think a lot of those leaks are disinformation. But we did come up with the correct one on this ISIS. They were the ones who
said there was a town in Jordan named Ishwarwa, where there was a base where Syrians opposed to Assad were trained and armed and sent into the battle, and in a very brief time they became ISIS. And that part is the miracle.
And it's true. But it's much bigger than that. And most of that funding came through Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and that's one of the reasons why the U.S. is in Yemen, or at least Saudi Arabia is in Yemen at the bidding of the U.S. to get rid of the Houthi rebels who are, the U.S. wants Hadi back in power so that it can continue to supply on behalf of the U.S. Jihadists. The U.S. doesn't want to get caught doing this directly, so they're using surrogates. And but it's a real
gosh almighty. Joel, just so you know, this week I came back on the scene. Look at the Vatican Paris article. It's not yesterday's news. I've been reporting this for a long time. And, well, what are you going to say except the Vatican has made plain which side. Well, let's put it this way. They are supporting a Palestine with their own saints from Palestine, 19th century Palestine. They are supporting all this, and none of it is good for Israel. None of it.
That's right, and I'm convinced that there is a major controlling factor in the Vatican as well that is heeding the globalist agenda and working to establish an international capital in Jerusalem. Yes. It's been great to be with you.
Our time has run out, but it was a wonderful hour. Quickly, tell people how to get a hold of you.
They can find me at editor at worldaffairsbrief.com, and that's my website.
Thank you, Joel. This is a meeting of minds. It really was a meeting of minds tonight. Folks, this is Barry Chamish. I'll be back in 7 minutes with Pat Murphy for an easier, let's just say a laid-back hour coming up in 7. See you then. Thank you, Joel.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188. Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net.
American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. A deadly weekend shootout in Waco, Texas, involving rival motorcycle gangs apparently began with a parking dispute and someone running over a gang member's foot. The dispute escalated to violence that left 9 people dead and 18 wounded. Police are concerned that Sunday's brawl will invite retaliation and more violence. The formal sentencing of Boston Marathon bomber Johar Tsarnaev will take place next month. Denise Lavoie reports.
The prosecutor said that approximately 20 victims of the bombing have expressed interest in speaking at the hearing, and he said he is not sure at this point whether that number will grow, but that he expects the sentencing hearing can be completed in one day.
The House has given final congressional approval to an anti-human trafficking bill.
The vote to combat what one lawmaker called the scourge of trafficking was overwhelming.
The yeas are 420. The nays are 3.
The legislation raises the fines on sex traffickers and creates a new fund to help the victims of sex trafficking. This is Texas Congressman Ted Poe.
The traffickers even brand the victims, Mr. Speaker, on the neck with a brand so that other traffickers will know who they are, whose property they belong to.
The quick House approval was a marked contrast to the Senate, where the measure got caught up in a dispute over abortion funding. Jerry Bodlander, Capitol Hill.
A conservative religious rights commentator believes if the Supreme Court decides in favor of same-sex marriage,